There's no escaping the fact that Honda's season was largely a disaster. We've been questioning for some time now, have Honda finally reached their lowest ebb, and is it time to start the long uphill climb? Well, after one final season of suffering, we think it might just be time for that. But first, let's look back at 2023. Honda came into the new season with an updated machine and rider lineup, one that took in the ex-Suzuki pairing of Joan Mir and Alex Rins. A world champion and the rider that just won 2 of the last 3 races of 2022, there was hope and genuine belief that Honda might be able to turn things around this season. While Marc Marquez stole headlines with the first pole position of the season in Portimao and then a podium in the inaugural Tissot Sprint, it wasn't long before things unravelled. His unfortunate early crash in the Grand Prix sidelined Marc for the next 3 weekends, and with his Honda teammates 10th, 11th and 12th, there wasn't much to write home about. In fact, other than Alex Rins' stunning weekend in America, there wasn't much else to write home about at all in the first half of the season. Injuries, poor results, and the classic complaints of a motorcycle that wasn't doing what they wanted it to do were all too familiar for HRC. Change had to come, and change did come after the summer break, as Honda unveiled a radical new aero that was much larger than anything they had used before. Honda stated they believed this philosophy of larger aero was the way forward, and they were committed to pursuing it and finding the benefits of it. The Misano test following the San Marino Grand Prix would eventually prove to be fruitful despite a new prototype not quite making the grade. It was later revealed that there they would find a front setup that allowed for more margin, something desperately needed with the troublesome RC213V. It wasn't a drastic improvement, but it was enough to provide at least a small direction for future progress. Directly after Misano, we arrived in India for the first time, a new track that held the possibility for surprises, and probably the biggest surprise of 2023 did then follow. Honda were genuinely very fast in India, and not just Marc Marquez either, Joan Mir was too. Mir had his standout weekend of the season by some way, with the number 36 qualifying 5th on the grid. He was running 4th in the sprint before unfortunately crashing out, but would then rebound to a fine 5th in the Grand Prix the following day. Marc would also have strong rides that weekend, finishing 3rd in the sprint and then charging back through to 9th in the Grand Prix after slipping off at turn 1 while in 4th as well. That weekend saw us discover something about the RC213V that hadn't really been seen just yet. The bike did have a strong point, and that strong point was powering off the slower corners with not too much lean angle. The thing that was hurting Honda severely was rear grip on the edge of the tyre in the middle of the corner, so when they had long corners that they had to power through, they just couldn't do anything. The rest of the season saw just as much talk about Honda's rider lineup as their bike. The well-documented rumours of Marc Marquez potentially walking away from Honda at the end of the season went into overdrive during the same Indian GP weekend, when it was publicly mentioned by Paolo Ciabatti that Marc had a possible option with Gresini Racing. Those rumours only then intensified when at the very next race, a brilliant podium in Japan, Honda's home race as well, Marc termed it as romantic himself. Sure enough, just 3 days later, Repsol Honda announced that HRC and Marc Marquez were to end their collaboration by mutual agreement, bringing to an end an 11-year partnership that saw 6 world titles, 59 wins, and 101 podiums. Truth be told, many had already gotten used to the idea and truly believed that the announcement that Marc was leaving was coming for quite some time. But even then, it still sent a shockwave to the very core of the MotoGP world. With the big dark cloud of Marc's impending decision hanging over HRC's head now gone, thoughts could turn back to the bike, but also who would replace Marc for 24. With Taka Nakagami already in for 2024 and also confirmed to have a new teammate in Johann Zarco due to Alex Rins' departure, only the factory seat remained to be filled. Plenty of names were linked to the spot: Miguel Oliveira, Maverick Vinales, Fabio Di Gianantonio, Pol Espargaro, Fermin Aldeguer, and it wasn't until prior to the final weekend of the season in Valencia that one name really stood out as the concrete choice. That, of course, turned out to be Luca Marini, who was eventually announced on the Monday after the Valencia GP. While Valencia was a difficult weekend for Rins, Nakagami and poor Joan Mir suffered another small injury, it was fitting that Marc got his final flourish with Honda. In his own words, it was the first time all season he was able to do the qualifying lap on his own and without a marker. He then took an emotional sprint podium and on Sunday he was on for another good result before unfortunately crashing out with championship hopeful Jorge Martin. The end of the 2023 season was truly the closing of a huge chapter in HRC's lifetime, with next season holding their biggest shake-up since Casey Stoner retired at the end of 2012. Their star rider leaves for another factory, and in his place steps in both youth and experience. Johann Zarco brings with him bags of experience of other motorcycles and, crucially, recent experience of the best motorcycle on the grid. Zarco's feedback was highly valued at Ducati, and he was often used as their primary permanent test rider. He had a huge hand in developing the Ducati into what it is now, and bringing that experience and knowledge of how the Desmos Adichie works is like gold dust to Honda. Luca Marini steps into big shoes at Repsol Honda, and it's vital that they do not expect him to fill those shoes in the same way. Honda have arguably been guilty of listening too much to Marquez in the past and relying on his talent to fill in the gaps of a difficult-to-ride motorcycle. Many believe that Mark leaving might actually be a good thing for HRC, as it will take that scenario out of the equation entirely. What Luca brings is, of course, bags of speed and talent himself. This, after all, is a rider that took 6 podiums in 2023 across sprints and GPs. He also has bags of knowledge of a bike that works better, and he'll expect Honda to react to his feedback and actively build on that on a regular basis. Luca admits himself that he thinks he'll be a great fit for that kind of role. He has brilliant sensitivity of what the bike is doing and knows how to convey that feedback and feeling to the engineers so they can understand where and how to improve. And the good thing is, Honda have already improved. Their first step at a 2024 bike at the Valencia test was met with genuine optimism, and it's the first tangible step we've seen Honda make since the start of 2022. Mir was complimentary of it, saying it was easier to ride, had better grip, and that he saw genuine progress for the first time since he joined Honda. While Luca couldn't talk after the test due to contractual reasons, his lap time was incredibly positive, and Taka Nakagami, after just a handful of laps on the bike at the end of the day, could even say he felt positive things too. With the addition of next year's concessions, Honda will be afforded extra engines, extra wildcards, extra test tyres, and they're allowed to test with their regular riders, as well as their engine development is not frozen. We said at the start, when will Honda begin their long uphill climb? Well, it seems they might just have already taken the first step. 2024 could finally be the year Honda return to something that resembles the likes of their former power.